What's good? It's your boy 2K here. Shout out to the movement and everybody who's moving with us. Today was an excellent day for boxing. Not only did we see some of the best fighters across multiple divisions, but we were able to see one of the best fighters in the sport in terms of skill. We also were privy to some of the better prospects in the sport that are actually across the pond, right? Lewis Ritson, the hard-hitting 135-pounder. He did a good job today in showcasing his skills. And then, of course, one of my favorite prospects in the game, Josh Kelly, showcased his skills at 147 pounds. And we did recaps on the majority of these fights over on 3kingsboxing.com, so go ahead and check those out when you get the chance. I'll probably do an isolated video on Lewis Ritson and Josh Kelly, since they are across the pond. A lot of cats don't know who they are. And then, of course, you got the so-called boxing enthusiasts that think they know who fighters are, but they really don't know. So you got to educate the so-called boxing enthusiasts as well. But those two cats, I'm telling you, man, don't sleep on them cats. I've been telling y'all about Josh Kelly for quite some time, but Lewis Ritson is another cat that just popped on the radar. Don't sleep on these boys, man. But anyway, this video is really about how Errol Spence, with his win today, pretty much showed us something that if you haven't already been on this particular train or already on this particular thought process, then you should be, because I've already expressed it once on my channel. He pretty much showed that the biggest fight in the welterweight division that could be made is him versus Terence Crawford. Now, me personally, I think Errol Spence versus Terence Crawford, in terms of true skill, is the greatest fight to be made in the sport of boxing. And the way that you determine that is this. When you look at two fighters, you pretty much look at a matchup, and you're trying to make a comparison stylistically to determine which fighter could win that fight. It's damn near impossible, without watching extensive amounts of film, to definitively say that Errol Spence beats Terence Crawford, Terence Crawford beats Errol Spence. That is, of course, if you know what the fuck you're talking about. You know what I'm saying? Now, a lot of cats will just jump out there and say, yeah, I think Errol Spence wins, and that's mainly because they really like Errol Spence. Or, oh, I think Terence Crawford wins, and that's just because they really like Terence Crawford. But if you're really an objective person in the sport, and you cover the sport and follow it as somebody who really doesn't have an allegiance to any of these fighters, you cover it as an analyst. You look at styles, you compare and contrast different things that, you know, fighters do in the ring that one may be able to exploit better than another, right? It becomes a situation where this fight is truly 50-50, man. It's hard to make a pick. You know, Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder, I could make a pick in that fight. You know, Mikey Garcia, Vasyl Lomachenko, I can make a pick in that fight. Jarrett Hurd, Jermell, Charlo, I can make a pick in that fight. You know what I'm saying? But Terence Crawford, Errol Spence, I can't definitively tell you right now. That's real talk. You know what I'm saying? So, it's the best fight to be made. Let's break down this fight for a second. Not much to break down. At first, when you watch the beginning of the first round, you come to believe that Carlos Ocampo is coming into the fight with this type of confidence where he could possibly push Errol Spence to the limit, right? You know, guys like Lamont Peterson, he failed to do it. You know, Chris Van Heerden, Leonard Bundu, Alejandro Barrera, you know, they failed to do it. Kell Brook did an excellent job in the first 4 rounds, pushing Errol Spence to the limit. He actually controlled that fight in the first 4 rounds. But after that, you know, the body work, the pressure, let me say the effective aggression, because that is key. Pressure and effective aggression are two different things. Pressure can mean ineffective pressure, while effective aggression means you are applying pressure effectively, breaking your opponent down. You see what I'm saying? And that's what Errol Spence did after the 4th round against Kell Brook. So, you know, when this fight was announced, we understood that he had to defend against his mandatory IBF rules, right? But we were all hoping, especially watching the buildup of this fight, you know, prior to tonight and before those two got in the ring tonight, we were hoping that the confidence of Carlos Ocampo would make it a good fight. And like I said, in the beginning of the first round, it looked like it was going to be that way. He was able to land some shots on Errol Spence. But Spence, being somebody that we already know does get hit, and at times, in my opinion, I believe that he shows that because he understands that that person can't hurt him. So he's willing to take a couple shots in order to walk his opponent down and beat him to the body, right? We knew that Spence was just going to do that pretty much. He would take some shots, but evidently at some point, whether it was round 2, 3, 4, or 10, he was going to break Carlos Ocampo down. But he broke him down in the first round. And it was an excellent left hook to the body. Honestly, if you go back and look at the Vasyl Lomachenko versus Jorge Linares fight, it was the same left hook to the body. Errol Spence's was just a little bit inside the elbow, where Vasyl Lomachenko's was a little bit more outside the elbow, right? His landed more so on the liver, where Errol Spence's landed more so on the solar plexus. But it was the same type of punch, and it has the same type of damage done to that person's body. And you can see both of those guys, they pretty much just crumbled up, you know what I'm saying, to their knees. Went down to their knees and just pretty much crumbled up. And both guys tried to get up, but the wind was taken out of them to the point where they couldn't breathe. You know, they couldn't bring in any more oxygen in order to put the strength in their legs to be able to put themselves back on their feet. They couldn't do it, at least not in 10 seconds, right? So, again, man, that shows the ability of Errol Spence to have above average, excellent punch placement. He knows exactly where he wants to throw a punch, and he throws it exactly there, and it lands where he wants it to land. Excellent punch placement, right? The one thing I worry when I look at a Terence Crawford matchup is this. One thing I worry about is what I just said earlier. Errol Spence is willing to take shots to walk his opponent down. You don't want to do that against Terence Crawford. I understand that Crawford is the smaller guy. Errol Spence could easily fight at 154 pounds. He could probably fight at 160 pounds, right? And while I'm not saying Errol Spence is anywhere compared to Jeff Horn, when we look at how big these guys are, they are somewhat comparable. Jeff Horn could also easily fight at 154 and 160 possibly, right? Jeff Horn rehydrates to 160 pounds in most of his fights. So he could easily make those two weights as well. That is the only way, only thing that those two, Errol Spence and Jeff Horn, have in common. But the one thing I want you to understand is, for one, Terence Crawford showed that he can handle a bigger guy on the inside against Jeff Horn. While he doesn't have the same skill set as Errol Spence on the inside, he showed that he could handle a bigger body on him. He showed that he could turn a bigger man. He showed that in the clinches, he could win that battle against the bigger man, right? Errol Spence is a strong motherfucker, but Terence Crawford showed that he's also a strong motherfucker as well, right? So, but anyway, the one thing I don't like is Errol Spence possibly attempting to walk down Terence Crawford, assuming he's the smaller guy, and allowing Terence Crawford to tee off on him. See, the one thing that won't happen is Terence Crawford stops and stays in the pocket at the wrong time. He's a very cerebral fighter. Terence Crawford will fight you in the pocket when he knows that he can. He won't do it if he doesn't think he can, or if he believes it's not the right time to do so. Perfect example against Victor Postal, right? He could have easily fought Victor Postal in the pocket, but he knew that if he did, he would be giving Postal opportunities, so he elected to box him from the outside pretty much the entire fight. He would mix it up a little bit, get on the inside and land some shots, then immediately jump it right back out before Postal can respond. You see what I'm saying? I see Terence Crawford doing the same thing to Errol Spence simply because Spence is showing that he's willing to take shots, right? Spence doesn't have great head movement, doesn't have great upper body movement at all. You see what I'm saying? But he does have a high guard, but at the same time, like I said, he's susceptible to the jab. We saw that against Chris Van Heerden. He's susceptible to feints and possibly the right uppercut. We saw that against Alejandro Barrera, right? As far as being susceptible to feints, Kell Brook was doing a little bit of that in their fight. And he was getting off after he'd feint against Errol Spence. You know what I'm saying? My worries about Terence Crawford is that he gets a little bit complacent in the ring at times, right? He gets too comfortable when he feels like he's dominating the fight, that at points he can give opportunities to his opponent. Also, Terence Crawford has never fought anybody on the level of Errol Spence. Of course, that's the same for Errol Spence as well, right? But Spence will have more confidence on his side simply because Crawford is going to his division. You see what I'm saying? So Crawford has never fought a prolific body puncher who is as cerebral as Errol Spence. He's never fought anybody like that. So that's what I worry about these two fighters, man. And again, that's why it's such a 50-50 fight. That's why it's so hard for me to pick. You know what I'm saying? But after tonight and after last weekend, it's clear to me, and it's actually before that, because I made the video about these two guys in a What's Hot segment a couple weeks ago, I believe. And I told y'all in that video that this was the biggest fight to be made at welterweight. So it was clear to me before last weekend that this was a major fight that needed to be made. But after tonight, it is crystal clear to me that it is the biggest fight to be made in the sport. Just by skill, just based off skill. Of course, in terms of popularity, the biggest fight to be made in the sport will be Canelo and Triple G, and that's already made. And arguably Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua, right? But in terms of skill, man, these two motherfuckers take that goddamn title, man, as far as the best fight to be made in the sport. Who you got? YouTube, do what you do in the comment section. Let me know what you think. At the end of the fight, man, Jim Gray was trying to get the whole Terence Crawford talks pushed towards Errol Spence, and Spence was just like, yeah, you know, the fight might not get made this year, but I'd definitely like to see that fight next year. And on social media, Terence Crawford, you know, he's basically saying, hey, you know, I watched Carlos Ocampo fight. Errol Spence should kill this dude, which he did. So Terence Crawford was watching. And we all know Crawford's been calling out Spence. So let's see what happens, man. Do what you do in the comment section. Would be real. This is real talk for real fans. One.